Today I'm going to talk about sulfites, just explain a little bit about what they are, why they're in wine, what they do, and some common questions that come and are revolved around sulfites in wine. And sulfites are something I think we talk and hear a lot more about lately with the rise of natural wine. I think all of us have picked up a wine bottle before and seen on the back of that wine bottle, this wine contains sulfites. So today, that's exactly what I'm going to cover. I want to do a deeper dive on what that is. So I'm going to kick it off right now. And basically, sulfites, they are chemical compounds and they are derived from sulfur. And they are primarily used as a food preservative, and they happen to be a really, really good preservative. And to move away from sulfite well, I guess not really, but anyways, I want to talk about preservatives in food and why they're there, what they do, and how they work. So obviously preservatives in food are there to keep our food from going bad, from spoiling. And the way that food spoils is it really comes down to a couple different things. It's usually because of microbial spoilage. It's because unwanted microbes start, growing on that food, or it's because of oxidation. Microbial spoilage would be like those white fuzzy things that start to grow in your strawberries and they kind of get gross. That's like a fungus. That's microbial spoilage. Oxidation would be like if you have a green banana, you take a bite of it, it starts to get oxidized. I'm sorry, a green apple, take a bite of it, starts to get oxidized. Or like those like black frozen bananas that are in your freezer because you're gonna make banana bread with them. Those are oxidized bananas because they turn from yellow to black. Oxygen's just completely gotten to them. So sulfites happen to be really, really good at preventing both of those things. They basically they neuter the microbes by interfering with their ability to reproduce, and they block the oxygen from really being able to take over the wine molecules. So to talk a little bit more about oxidation in wine, that's really sort of the more important aspect of sulfites. I guess they're sort of equally important, but the long game of sulfites is to prevent from oxidation. And see, wine, I think a lot of us are familiar with the fact that wine becomes vinegar, or can become vinegar, and really all wine in its cycle of life is on its way to become vinegar. And what sulfites do is they really slow that down dramatically to the point where you can age the wines and cellar them for years, and the shelf life really holds up with good integrity. The way that wine becomes vinegar is something I just want to talk about a little bit because I think it's relative. Oxygen molecules are like really, really sticky, and sulfite molecules are also really, really sticky. They just kind of want to bond to all kinds of other molecules. And what sulfites do when you introduce them to wine early on, they're going to bond with the molecules that essentially are your wine. And you could think of them like as the bouncer of a nightclub. And oxygen is the guy that you don't really want in the club. So sulfites are going to get in there. They're going to block the door. They're going to attach to the molecules. And when oxygen tries to get in, it's blocked. It can. So it sort of, it prevents, that from happening. And to stay on this subject, there is something there's a bacteria that's all around us. It's in the air, it's on everything. It's on our hands. It's even in trace amounts in the wine that's in the bottle on your cellar right now. And it's called Acetobacter. And what Acetobacter is, it's a type of bacteria and it eats oxidized molecules. So if your wine is oxidized, the Acetobacter, it's going to be susceptible for the Acetobacter to eat that. And what Acetobacter does is it eats oxidized molecules and it turns them into water and acetic acid. And acetic acid is vinegar. That's that tart vinegarness. So, that's essentially how wine becomes vinegar, through getting oxidized. It allows the Acetobacter to flourish and chew up the wine, turning it back into water and acetic acid vinegar, a red wine vinegar, essentially. So, I'm gonna kind of move away from this because it's starting to get, it's starting to get deep. I kind of want to move on to the difference between wines made with sulfites and wines made without sulfites. And wines made without sulfites, really sort of encompass this category of natural wine. And there's, a bunch of, sort of subcategories in natural wine to me. I mean, there's, the term 0-0, which is like nothing added, nothing taken away. The winemaker literally does like nothing to the wine. There's all kinds of additives, ingredients and chemicals and things like that we as winemakers have available to us to make the wine, better or more in the style of how we want it. 0-0 winemakers, they don't use any of that. There's minimal intervention wine, which, they do very, very little to the wine. Sometimes they might use a little bit of sulfites in the beginning or the end of the process, right before the bottling of the wine. There's also low sulfite wine, which is, I guess, sort of the same thing. There's the term clean wine that gets kicked around, which I guess a clean wine would be, it's really just a marketing term, but a clean wine is just like a dry, light body wine, like a Chardonnay or a Pinot Noir, and maybe it might have low sulfite addition. So it's really just dry wine. It's going to be low carb. I don't really love the term because it sort of implies that it's a healthier alternative, but I mean, wine's not health food. So, but whatever, I'm not, that's just my opinion, man. So, I'm gonna kind of move on from that and talk more about the difference between wine made with sulfites and wine made without sulfites. So, wine made without sulfites, I'll start there. It can be more aromatic. It can have brighter fruit notes, be a lot more of like a fruit bomb. It's going to have a completely different character to it. The downside is it's when you don't sort of start with the clean palate by using sulfites, it opens the wine up to, off flavors and aromas and unwanted microbes and things like that. Doing things to the wine that might not necessarily impart good flavors and aromas. Wild yeast is an example. Sometimes wild yeast is amazing. It makes a beautiful, aromatic, complex, beautiful color, everything like that. Sometimes you don't know what kind of strain you're getting, and it's going to get stressed out. It's going to start making hydrogen sulfide, which is what happens to yeast when it gets stressed out. Hydrogen sulfide is like, we call it like rhino farts. Like it's like sewer gas. It's rotten eggs. It's super gnarly. So if you've ever smelled like a farty wine, that's why, because it was a stressed out fermentation. And that's why your wine is farty. So, moving back, like wine made with sulfites, not to say that it's going to be less complex, less fruity, something like that. It's just going to have a different molecular fingerprint. And kind of what I mean by that is like wine has tens of thousands of chemical compounds in them. And we're learning more and more about this all the time. I think there's like a new emerging field. It's called metabolomics. And it's really the study of these tens of thousands of chemicals and essentially how they interact with each other, how they form, what they do, what they smell like, what they taste like, essentially what their purpose is, and particularly in regards to food. And wine, this definitely applies. So there's tens of thousands of chemical compounds in wine. And, when someone says that they smell passion fruit in like a Sauvignon Blanc, the reason why they're saying that is because the specific chemical compound, like the chemical phenol that makes passion fruit smell like passion fruit, is in that wine. Like it was created through the fermentation process. So that exact same chemical is there. So when they say they're smelling passion fruit, they are smelling passion fruit because the same chemical compound is there. And this is kind of where sulfites play a role when I say that they can change the molecular fingerprint. If you have the exact same Sauvignon Blanc juice and you add sulfites to it in the beginning of the fermentation process, you're going to get like a more passion fruit, Sauv Blanc, most likely, if you have the right fermentation conditions. If you ferment the same grape juice using no sulfites or very, very little sulfites under essentially proper same conditions, you'll probably end up with like more of a tropical Sauv Blanc, more, pineapple, banana, that kind of thing. So it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just going to change. You're going to have a different wine. It's absolutely going to affect the wine one way or the other. It's just going to change the molecular fingerprint. So it really just comes down to the wine, and the winemaker and overall. I mean, the downside of not using sulfites is the wine's not going to last as long. You're more prone to acetobacter taking over, and like the wine becoming vinegar. You're more prone to other faults like rhino farts. So that's sort of, the downside of not using sulfites. The winemakers use sulfites because it's like starting with a clean canvas. You're just sort of blasting the wine with a quick cloud of sulfuric death. Or gessoing your canvas. So you just start with a nice, I put it gently, like you're just going to gesso your canvas. You're going to start with a nice clean canvas where you can really control, the fermentation process. So I want to move away from this again because I'm starting to get a little talky, but I want to kind of keep it a little in the subject of natural wine. But another question that comes up is, are sulfites healthy, or are sulfites unhealthy for you? Are they bad for your health? How do they affect your health? And it's a really good question. And, sulfites are really, really safe. They've been around for hundreds of years in various different forms as a preservative to protect foods and wines. The reason that, the only people who are really sensitive to sulfites they found are asthmatic people, and people with asthma, the amount of them that are sensitive to sulfites is still really low. And really the only reaction that happens is it's like a mild breathing, effect. So it's like overall, like sulfites are super, super innocuous. There's a lot of foods probably that you eat every day that have a lot more sulfites in it than wine does. Red wine, I think, regular sort of red wine you buy at the grocery store has probably 150 to 250 parts per billion per gallon of sulfites. Something like frozen shrimp would have, 300 parts per million per gallon of sulfites, and it kind of keeps going up from there. Like French fries are like 500 parts per million, and they can actually be like up into the thousands plus. Dried fruit, raisins, 2,800 parts per million of sulfites, certain frozen vegetables like diced bell peppers and stuff, like 5,800 parts per million of sulfites and up. So like those potatoes O'Brien, like those things are like nukes, they're like sulfite nuke bombs. But they're really actually all safe. Like all of that is within the threshold that is totally safe for human consumption. So, it's kind of going to lead me, basically I'm saying that sulfites really aren't going to be, terrible for your health. There's probably things that you eat every day that are worse. Sometimes, I get the question like, I think sulfites give me headaches. When I drink wine with sulfites, I get a really bad headache. I'm going to say here that it's, this is a question that comes up a lot. I'm gonna say it's probably not the sulfites. As I was kind of saying before, the only people who are really sensitive to sulfites are people with asthma, and those issues are usually, respiratory related. It's probably something else that's causing a headache. Tannins is something that also comes up a bit. Wines have tannins in them. That's like a whole nother talk. I'm not going to really go into it, but, red wine has more tannins than white wine. Some people say, oh, I can't drink red wine because of the tannins. Tannins can increase, serotonin levels in the brain, and that can give some people headaches. I guess, I really don't think that's usually the reason. Red wine particularly has histamines in it. All wine does, but red wine more than white wine. And the histamine, is really found in the skins, and that can absolutely bother people. If you have allergies, I have allergies. Sometimes certain red wines, I haven't really identified why, but can bother me. They make me stuffy. They can make me a little blotchy. So that can give you a headache too, because it dilates blood vessels, and that can give you a headache. So Claritin, if wine makes you kind of stuffy, take some Claritin before you're going to drink some wine. It's definitely, that'll probably help. The other thing it could be is, you know, residual sugar. There's a lot of residual sugar in wine, and it's also probably not drinking enough water. I think that's kind of the main thing that all of us are guilty of is, you know, drinking alcohol, you know, residual sugar, not drinking enough water, you're going to have a headache and a hangover. So, you know, overall, I'm just going to say drink your water, eat your French fries, drink your red wine. Sulfites are not going to kill you. I don't know, that's basically all I got. That's my talk for today. So let me know if you guys have any questions, and thanks.